I mean, well, for starters, I thought it was strange that they age restricted it. There wasn't really anything objectionable that I could see.
Um,
What am I missing? Like,
well, I mean, I think that the point that they're it's age restricted because like clearly like let me try to say this in a way that's clear but also uh age not age restricted or
right.
age restricted. um well, all right, I'll put it this way. How long do you think that the relationship that also Richie Mack, right? That was the person in the that narrating the video.
Okay.
Do you think that like that was real, like the relationship that he had?
Probably not.
Okay, there we go.
You know, there's, you know, again, I don't know, but based
Mhm.
on what I know about um relationships that people pursue in South Asian countries,
Mhm.
like if they're from the first world and they pursue a relationship, a lot of times, uh, I'm trying to say it not age restricted. Uh,
Mhm.
a lot of times it's less than above board, we'll say.
Well, you can say whatever you want, but I mean,
Yeah. Well,
clearly, he didn't find her at like a church picnic, right?
right,
So,
right,
yeah.
right. But I think that that was under the surface. It wasn't like, oh, hey, I'm gonna go to, you know, a seedy, place and pick up uh, a wife or whatever.
Okay.
So, I don't know. I think, I wouldn't have, I mean, maybe I'm just weird, but I wouldn't have any problem. If I had a kid and I showed my kid that, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, like, shut your eyes. That's terrible. But at the same time, a kid may not pick up on, you know, the idea of the transactional nature of a lot of these relationships.
All right. So yeah, I think that's the point of it though.
Yeah,
So one thing is like, okay, she's not she's a woman of the evening, a one nighter,
sure.
that sort of stuff. But beyond that, I think that it's age restricted more so because the women and the whole thing are curvy. I think it's less you're looking like that, but I look
Yeah,
at a lot of stuff like that gets age restricted and it's like perfectly fine, but they have a woman in that's like curvaceous.
but
Like
that's her body.
that's what I mean though. That's the thing. So they're essentially restricting the fact that wait, who most likely has more curvy bodies, like black and brown people, right?
Okay,
and
sure,
and so that's why it got restricted, and then also they have less clothes on, right? So it makes them appear more curvy.
sure.
But I think that's the bigger thing that
Okay,
I saw from all of that. I'm familiar with what goes on. He's in Pattaya, right?
okay.
Or Pattaya, if you want to pronounce it the way it should be. And the whole mo there is like at least 85% of the women out of the millions of, probably not millions, at least over a million women there are hookers. They're
Sure,
whores.
sure.
85 of them. So what does that leave? Like most of the population there is like 35 plus. It's not a young population. It's not like crazy old, but it's not a young population. So all the other 15% of that 85 is like people that are delivering your dry cleaning that are females, or like
Yeah,
people, so they're people that are basically outside the dating pool. So
right.
they wouldn't be ladies of the evening or whatever, it's of the evening, whatever people
Sure,
want to be called, right?
sure.
So that's how I look at all of that, right?
Okay,
so so basically she was in, if the woman's name is L, if she
okay.
was she moved to that area, to Pattaya specifically, to probably get into the life, right?
Yeah,
So that
sure.
was her intention, right? Because that's how you kind of start out. Typically, you don't start out like saying, "Hey, I do anal," right? You start firstly, you start out with like, "Hey, I
I
work
mean,
at,"
I start out like that.
you know what I mean, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I don't think some men don't have a choice, right? And maybe that's so, so that's part of it too. But you see what I mean? Like, so
Right.
her intention of moving there was to probably slide into that life, but then she met him, and she's like, "Hey, wait a minute! All I have to do is cook, clean, right? Like stuff that I was taught when I was a child. I just take it the extra mile because I learned later on this guy is paying her $500 a month
Okay.
for just being around the house doing like wifely stuff. So $500 there is basically more than like a living wage.
Sure.
So basically you can get a good apartment if for a year on month to month for less than $200 a month, like a nice maybe like one to two to maybe even three bedroom
Wow.
for 200, right? So
Right.
imagine what $500 to somebody that was looking for a $200 a month apartment is, and you get to live there. So she's not paying anything to live there. All she's doing is
Sure.
cooking, cleaning, like doing things that a traditional wife would do, right? So
Interesting.
yeah. So that was
So
my
basically, she's his maid that he also bangs.
correct. Yeah. Yeah. And purely transactional. So a lot of
Sure.
it is like, how long is this going to last, right?
It's going to last until one of them gets bored.
True.
You
True.
know,
I mean, the thing is, maybe they'll never get bored though.
possibly.
Because what, like, if a guy's getting exactly what he wants and the woman's compliant and she's getting exactly what she wants, why would she go somewhere else?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. And I mean, it's not, I mean, obviously it's different from a standard relationship in that most people aren't, you know, dating prostitutes, but there is always a transactional element to a relationship.
Yeah, so I have a lot of I have friends, acquaintances, everything else. They basically have the phrase like you're gonna pay for it either way,
It's true.
right?
Yeah, it's
And
true.
they often say that getting a hooker is less expensive.
Depends.
If you think about it, like divorces, so the biggest wealth transfer in the USA between males and females is a divorce system, period.
That
You
doesn't
look at it.
surprise me at all. Yeah.
So if you look at it that way, it's cheaper to rent, right? So
Right.
yeah.
Cheaper to rent. Yeah, I mean,
Because if you go to a country like Pattaya, right, the prices there, we don't need to discuss prices, but it's less than you'd pay for a, uh, a meal in
right,
the USA.
right. Yeah,
So
that's pretty
so
crazy.
yeah, so less than you pay even at a McDonald's meal.
Yeah, yeah. Crazy.
So you could say, yeah, I get the dollar menu or the dollar menu. That's like right, because that's basically you
Yes.
just add the more it's a dollar for the more you add. So why would somebody that specifically can get whatever they want on the dollar menu and they can afford that, why would they just not do that the same way that McDonald's is the has sells the most hamburgers in the world, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. And if it is pretty cynical though to look at it that way. Not to say that it's not true to a point, but it's very
Mhm.
cynical.
Okay, go
And
ahead.
I'm trying not to be cynical.
So what's cynical about it? Because that's one of those big words that's like a cynicist. Like, so what is that?
Yeah.
What are you feeling like a negative feeling about or negative thoughts or
So I think if you not saying you personally, but you like the general person, if you I mean you can minimize everything to a financial transaction,
Mhm.
but I think that if you're doing that, you're missing out on the bigger picture, um depending on what you're buying.
Mhm.
So for example, I'm a caricature artist, right?
Mhm.
I could just be like, oh, people buy caricatures from me and that's
Mhm.
it. It's purely transactional. That's not taking into account, oh, it makes people laugh. They can use it to grow their own business. They can use it to give a gift. So I guess what I'm saying is you can minimize everything to just the money transaction, but I think that's a small part of every transaction that you make with other people. And in the case of a girlfriend or a wife or whatever, I mean, sure, you can just buy a prostitute
Mhm.
and get your physical needs met. Sure, anyone can do that.
Mhm.
But there's other things, or you could pay her to clean your house, cook your meals, whatever. You could buy a maid to do that. You're not if you're just doing that, you're not getting the benefits that you get. Like, for example, me and my wife, we're best friends. We have fun together. I never question, I never question if she's with me for my money because I'm broke.
Uh,
So I know, so it's a more stable, uh uh more stable environment, more stable situation in some ways. I guess that's what I'm saying. I don't
who,
like to minimize
who brings
everything to,
stability to the relationship? You
what's
or
that?
who brings stability to the relationship?
We both do in different ways, you
Okay.
know. Some of the same ways, some different ways. Um, like, because here you go. I mean, we both pay the rent on our apartment. I could do that with a roommate. I don't need her to do that. I could get a roommate.
Mhm.
I could buy a prostitute to have sex. I could hire a maid to clean the house. I could hire a cook to cook my meals. Um, I could hire a therapist to talk to when I have a hard day.
Mhm.
All these things I could do, and not to say that she's filling those roles, but I'm saying it's a deeper connection that you would have with, than if you just hire somebody to do those various jobs, if that makes sense. I think there's more to it.
I
That's
get
all.
that, but couldn't you like you mentioned about 7 to 9 things that she does for you? Like you said,
Okay.
she does this. Couldn't you just pay 7 to 9 different people to do each one of those
I-
things?
yeah, absolutely. I
And they'd
could.
be and they'd have more energy because you only have so much energy in the out of a day. Like somebody to have energy to clean your place, somebody to have energy to always pay the rent on time and contractually do that. Somebody to make sure that they cook a meal for you. Somebody that to have to make sure they cuddle with you at night instead of
Sure.
just sex, right?
Yeah, I could do that, but um, yeah, I guess it goes back to what I'm saying. It's yeah, I could pay somebody to do that, but um, when you're in a relationship, um, and my wife does nice things for me, I do nice things for her. It's not because I'm wanting financial gain from it. It's because I feel good doing something nice for somebody I love, and vice versa. And I don't, you're right. I could hire people to do all that, but I think that's just it's minimizing uh it's minimizing the task down to their most basic. And I think that if you do that, you're missing out on a part of having a relationship with another person. I guess I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but that's I, I I'm not exactly sharing what I have in my head, but that's hopefully you get the gist of what I'm trying to say.
I get it. There's a romantic connection, right? You could pay a bunch of
Yes,
people, but doesn't mean you have a romantic connection. Whereas one person you could.
sure.
The other side is like, as a man, do you think you can love more than one woman? and
Yeah, I think
have a
yeah,
connection.
I think you could. I think everyone's, what's good for me might not be good for you or good for my other buddy or whatever.
Mm.
I think every relationship's a little bit different and everyone has their own wants and needs in the relationship. And I think the trick is to find a person who you're the most compatible with on your wants and needs. And nobody's going to be perfect. So yeah, I think you could love several women, men, whatever. um and maybe that works for some people. I mean, some people are in what is it, thruples or whatever they're called, where they have
Well,
polyamorous. Yes,
yeah. So
polyamorous.
here's the thing. I saw a meme. I should pull it up because that's probably an even better conversation.
Yeah,
Than even this. While I'm doing that, because I may not go with this. I do want to hear which, because what's more exciting is the Tate brothers stuff.
sure,
I
yeah, yeah.
sent you that video was 20 minutes. What did you think of that? Did you watch it?
I watched it. I
Okay.
can't say that I understood all the legal side of it.
It's Romania, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Not. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not familiar with Romania, so I don't.
Mhm.
So that's why I brought up the other video prior to this one, just because I guess I took more out of it. Um, but yeah, the Tate Brothers thing, it's interesting. I mean, I don't I don't know what you're looking for from me as far as.
It's just your thoughts on it. So this is the hot topic. So Andrew Tate is over the last, I'd say 4 months, more than 3 months. He's the most Googled person in the world,
Oh, I
past
didn't know that.
Donald Trump, past in for the last 3 months.
Yeah,
Most Googled person in the world, right? That's a big achievement because you're talking about
absolutely.
billionaires, presidents, dignitaries, religious folks, a guy that ran a webcam operation, right?
Right.
Because that's
That's
how he made
amazing.
most of his money apparently through that. So
Right.
that's what I mean. Like that's the most Googled person, period,
Do you think that's why
over
they
a
came
4 month
after
period.
him?
Well, yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, you're a celebrity and you're infamous, of
Yeah.
course, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I heard from, I don't know if you'd listened to the interview. What I like about it that was pulled out is the fact that, like, is being a celebrity in that sense really worth it?
Right.
Because essentially they were saying in that interview, like, a lot of people go for fame and they want to be internet famous, but this is the downside of it. Not only are
Sure.
you like, yeah, people are, but you're like, need to live in seclusion, but also when stuff like this happens, they prefer to keep you in jail for 30 days and seize your 11 to 33 cars allegedly that he has. And still, I didn't need to say allegedly, but I think it's kind of all bullshit and a lie, in terms of what. But that's just my assumption of everything, because he's definitely not a trillionaire. That's one thing I heard him say, and he's not a trillionaire.
No.
Probably not a billionaire. But either way, what I hear is that they're locking him up because the in Romania, the officials, judges, detectives, prosecutors, they don't want to appear as though they're being weak. That's the point of this. They don't want the guy, because of course Andrew Tate, if he's outside of jail, Tristan, if he's outside of jail, any other. I think there's two other females involved that are part of the sex trafficking. Andrew has been on there for the R word. So specifically, um, what you're looking at, it rhymes with grape. And what
I got it.
what we're looking for is not the other R word that's censored. And
What's the other one? Oh,
what they're looking at is what they're looking at specifically is that uh if they were to, like, let him free, he would obviously go on the internet and say, yeah, I'm famous, that's why they let me out, right?
sure.
Clearly, because he's already done that. I saw one video and they mentioned it in that interview, but he's like, yo, if I went to prison, I would just pay everybody. I would
Right.
have everything I want, except I'd
Right.
just, like, be behind bars.
Right.
Like, I'd have
Right.
everything I have now,
Sure.
just in a prison cell. Or
Yeah.
that's what he's saying, right? So he's taunting. That was a video, like, from, I don't know, more than a year ago, or at
Hmm.
least more than 6 months ago. But he's taunting the whole system, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So those those systems like Romania, they're known to be not as democratic about things. They're more to be just authoritarian about what's going on, and they see things for what it is on what could happen on the surface and who could be exposed and what sort of consequences that could people could have, and they don't want to be shamed, right? They don't want to be considered weak, all that stuff that I said. So what they're doing is, it appears as though, oh, this guy's famous, let's lock him up, right?
Sure.
Because we don't want him to say things about us, or us to appear as though we're not cracking down on somebody that could allegedly be have done the most hideous things people can say about somebody else.
Right. Right.
You see what I mean? So I think that's the bigger picture of it. It's like, what's the price of fame, right?
Oh yeah.
That's like the bigger thing, because people don't, I don't think I've ever seen that sort of spin on things. Typically what I hear is, oh, famous people get the best treatment, like if that something happens to them because they're famous.
I think it, well, yeah, I think it depends because, like you said, he's thumbing his nose at the system. I think
Yeah.
a lot of famous people get in line because they don't want something like this to happen to them,
Uh-huh.
regardless of what their, you know, specific opinions are.
Mm-hmm.
They're if it's opposed to the system, they're not going to say it, you know.
And I heard another opinion on a something else I watched, another like reaction of people looking at the whole Tate Brothers thing, and they're like, I hope he's guilty. And I think I sent you that video too. And the truth
Interesting.
is, it's like, because if he isn't, this is a terrible way to like drag somebody through the mud, right? So it's
Yeah.
like the worst way you could drag somebody, because on everything else, it's like entertainment, right, for most people. But if you look at it from like if this was you and you were locked up because of all these alleged things,
Right.
and like clearly this was meant to destroy him or ruin him, because 30 days outside of a business, specifically an information publishing business, which is likely how I believe he's making most of his money,
Yeah.
um, is kind of like a death sentence, because putting out content is the way that industry works.
Right.
If you aren't actively putting, this is why somebody else is still tweeting from him for him from jail.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because putting out content keeps you top of mind, because what does Andrew Tate provide that some other guy doesn't? I don't know what value he provides, because everything that I've heard is not new talking points.
Yeah.
It's not like he's like, this is what I think and how it's going to cure cancer and how it's what I've done, or something that's going to put it in but and stop, cut me off whenever you want, because I'm just kind of filling in my thoughts here. But he said nothing innovative, new, nothing at all. He may have just said it to a younger audience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't, our generation, I feel like we've seen enough. Like, it's just been time. It takes time to understand relationships, period.
Sure.
Everybody can tell you everything under the sun, but it's typically you that makes the mistake. Because like you talked about, hey, I have a connection with my partner, right? And this is why I do this, because I do things special, and you really can't, that money can't buy that.
Right.
It's also often the same thing with people and how they grow and learn about relationships. It's not, because everything isn't like, I'll learn from learning about your mistakes. Most people just learn from experience, period, no matter how many times you tell them, especially
Sure.
when like the word love is involved and there's feelings, right? That's the thing. Like, you can do a lot of, this is why, like, I think like when people perceive like, oh yeah, AI and robots are going to take over the world, it's because I think people believe that, and they think it's going to get to that point, because deep down they realize that, hey, robots don't have feelings and they just operate off of a code and instructions, whereas humans, they're always going to be like, how do I feel? So if the
Right.
judge in the Tate brothers case there, and all that whole operation, top G's in Hustle University, if they look at the whole thing, they're probably keeping them locked up on the basis of how's this going to make me look if like all the allegations are true,
Sure.
right? Because if
Sure.
it's just binary, like, the truth is, like, put them in their compound, Like it looks like a jail already from the outside of where they live anyway. Give them house arrest bracelets and then put 24-hour security or something outside of their place and have them pay for it because they can clearly afford it.
Right, right,
Right. So they
right.
can afford to pay the government to put government workers outside their place and put them on house arrest to make sure they never leave.
Sure.
And then they could have Romanian pizza all day long while they wait till their trial, right?
Yeah. It's interesting you brought up the AI thing. So forgive me if I'm getting a little bit off topic, but it's funny because I just had this conversation last week with a friend of mine talking about AI integrated into the legal system. And, the AI goes through case law because a big thing is, at least in the US, I don't know what it's like other places, at least in the US, precedent is, uh, important in deciding cases. And the thing is, if you integrate AI into that and then you integrate precedent into the programming, well, that precedent was, that happened at a time when not only was there not AI, there weren't computers. It was just fallible human beings making the best decision they could based on the information they had. And I think it's a two-edged sword with the AI because on the one hand, yeah, you're right, you're not going to have emotion clouding the judgment. So that's the positive part of it. But the negative part of it is you're not going to have emotion clouding the judgment because sometimes what's required is not justice but mercy. And I don't know when those times are, but you know, one of the I may have said this to you before, but one of the podcasters that I like is talking about how he grew up, or his family was from the Soviet Union, and uh, even under a strict authoritarian government and society like the Soviet Union was, you could still bribe the guards. They're still humans. You could still play on their emotions. You can still bribe them. If you have a totalitarian system that's run by computers, you're screwed. Like you can't buy off the AI, and that's a scary thought. But anyway, it's interesting that you brought that up because I just had that literal same conversation last week.
So alternatively, so I'll look at it this way, right? So I heard another theory from something I read a while back. There was a theory that said, okay, like basically when robots take over, we're going to be their pets, right?
Okay.
So, and then I think it alternatively, like at least in the USA, we treat our pets better than people.
Sure.
So like some people walk down the street, like when I was living in New York for a long time, and the homeless person will be sleeping right on the middle of the sidewalk, and the people will step over the homeless person to then take a couple steps, go to their house, and then bring their dog out and walk their dog and give their dog a treat, right?
Sure.
And right, and everything else, right? So in many cases, they were treating human or pets better than humans. So
Sure.
it's like maybe that's a good thing. Maybe a robot can be built in
It
to take
depends.
care of it, so
Yeah, I mean,
we can
it
max and
depends
relax.
on
Really.
what kind of a master you have. If you're a pet, I mean, because
Mm-hmm.
speaking of homeless people, there's homeless people that have dogs,
Mm-hmm.
and a dog whose master's a homeless person doesn't have as good of a life as, say, Kim Kardashian's dogs, or whatever, where they're able to pay
Relatively,
for
though,
that.
maybe that dog enjoys the. I mean, who's to say one dog is happier than the other just by unless you can physically tell that they're
Yeah,
unhappy.
I mean, yeah, that's fair, but I think too, you know, I mean, clearly humans have a higher cognitive ability than dogs and cats.
Mm,
And yeah, I mean, if we became the pets of the AI, yeah, it could be great,
mm,
but it could also be a nightmare.
mm,
And I'd rather not take that chance. I'd rather have the freedom to decide for myself how I want to live.
mm, mm.
And I might screw up my life, but it's on me.
Don't you think we don't have a choice though? Like we talked about, like I think it's Orwell and Orwellian theory, how like it's just going to get faster and faster, and then speed into where we have no choice because we're always looking for bigger, better, stronger, right? So eventually we're going
Well,
to get there anyway.
yeah, I mean, possibly. I
I
mean,
mean, why wouldn't it? Like what we don't build slower cars,
true,
right?
true.
So
I mean, I think in general, and I think this is pretty hard to argue. I think in general, our technology has developed too fast in regards to how slowly our morality evolves.
yeah.
So a good quote that I heard was, "We are Stone Age creatures with Middle Age institutions and space age technology, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a bad combination."
Mm-hmm.
Because basically we're not that different from cavemen.
Mm-hmm.
As far as our physiology or uh, our physical bodies, they're not that different, but our technology is certainly way different.
Mm-hmm.
And even our institutions are better, quote unquote, than they were during the Stone Age, but they're outdated, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the US, uh which is a relatively new country, uh you know our country was started, what constitution was, what, 1789, something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
when's the last time we had a constitutional amendment? It's been a while. I mean, so, and I think that technology and society has outpaced it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, yeah, I think the technology is going for where our morality is. Technology is far surpassed it, and what we're able to do to other people by using the technology is frightening, frankly, just between nuclear weapons and this kind of surveillance, this kind of stuff. Like, our morality is not kept up, and pretty nefarious people have gotten their hands on awesome technology and used it to crush people. And it's a sobering thought.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm getting at.
All right. All right. So there's two things that I thought of
Yeah.
while you said that. So I've been I just experimentally hiring from all over the world, different countries. One country that I like a lot that I feel like a lot of people avoid is Bangladesh.
Okay.
Do you know much about Bangladesh? Have you
I know it's very poor, and I know where it is, but that's about it.
Okay, so there's over 160 million people in Bangladesh,
Yeah.
half of the population of nearly the USA. Okay,
Right.
Bangladesh is like the
It's
size,
tiny.
yeah, very tiny, right? So
Yeah.
very dense population. I speak with folks there often now over the last 2 years, and
Mhm.
the interesting thing is, I feel like in terms of thought process and what they're doing, they're about 30 years behind the USA. So I
Mhm.
look at the times, like, or as an example, I went to school and college, lots of weight, and still to this day is put upon go to school to get that perfect career. And it's visions of the past of when people that were born in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and even 60s, they worked a job for 50 years and then they retired. That
Right.
vision, I believe, is gone in Bangladesh in terms of what it actually was. The vision's still there, but I think the practicality, just like the USA, is gone, except they're, like I said, 30 years behind the USA. So, like, for example, I know somebody that frankly works for me, and he wants to go to school, and he puts so much on school, but he's already extremely advanced, and he makes over $5,000 a month in profit doing what he's doing,
Oh, wow.
and he's just 21,
Yeah.
right? Which to them, most people, the average salary in Bangladesh, if you look it up, is less than $200 a month, I believe. So he's
Yeah.
making 5,000 as a 21-year-old, right? So that's, what I mean, basically he's well above the top 1%, right?
Sure.
He hasn't even lived half his life yet, in terms of expectancy. So, but he still puts so much focus because his parents on school, so he didn't get into a government school. But I asked him, I'm like, it's a government school, but like on all the buildings or most of them, don't they have names of people who donated the building on them? And he's like, yeah, they do. And I don't think he realized that yet, that like they're just building and building and building like they do with a lot of universities here in
Yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
USA. And it's like eventually, like all that stuff catches up with them, like schools now. Like if you look at only enrollment that's been increasing in terms of percentages in colleges is for African Americans
Is
across
that
the
right?
board if you look it up. So and a lot of it is historically black colleges, but if you look at enrollment across other nationalities, and you can dive in more because there's you know what I mean, I'm talking about a smaller percentage of the population that's going down, right? More folks are reconsidering college because they look at the expense of it. There's still a lot of push to go to school, but I think there's more evaluation, and they're looking back and they're saying, well, like the vision that my parents had and the practicality of it, of working a job and then retiring there, and knowing that the career that I go to school for is the one I'm going to have for the rest of my life, is not really is a false narrative.
Yeah.
And realizing that, hey, maybe school's not worth it. Do I want to rack up over $100,000 in debt to maybe get something right, and have to have that burden? Or can I just utilize the tools, the internet, the things that I have, sweat equity, to not take on debt and just continue to work? So Bangladesh isn't there yet, I believe. Like I said, a guy's making this much money, and how this came to it is he didn't get into the school he wanted to get into, and he was so distraught he shaved his head. Right. So when I talked to him, so that's a bigger thing in Bangladesh, because a young guy typically doesn't shave his head. He was just so sad, and he didn't want to have to take care of his hair when he was sad, so he just shaved it. And he's like, yeah, whenever I'm sad, I shave my head. So that was like his thing, but it was for me, it caused a trigger for me to ask more questions because I noticed something was wrong with him. Right. So it's they're like, I remember when college and stuff like that was in the stars for all my peers. It specifically, people were like, oh, my life's over because I didn't get into this school I wanted to get into, and I worked so hard for 4 years in high school, and I didn't get in. So like, I'm not going to be anything in life.
Yeah.
And we know that as older adults, that's not the case at all. It's just like there's so many opportunities. And then in addition, there's always ways to get a back door into these schools, right? There's
Oh,
always a way
sure.
to like go to community college or reapply, like until you get in, and eventually something happens where you crack the code if you fight hard enough, or you get
Yeah, right.
something similar, right? You may not get into Harvard, but you'll get to go to take Harvard classes like at night or
Sure.
something. There's always a way to get a degree, like if you want to pay for, you know what I mean? And is it worth it? If you want the education, you still get the education, you just don't get the prestige, but you still get is it worth the education? And I'm still going. But think about, I thought about, there's a quote that Neil deGrasse Tyson has, the guy that I pronounce his name a little funny, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And he basically is he basically said over a decade ago on Twitter, he was saying that, I'm paraphrasing, but he's thinking that, okay, if you're cheating in school to get a great grade and you're optimizing for that, you're just cheating yourself and you're ruining the learning process. Because if you're doing something where you're actually not studying, like for example, the Jasper AI stuff that I do right now, like I can write a better article through AI than a professional writer can right now, right? And most folks can't tell the difference, which is interesting.
Interesting.
Some people that are skilled, trained writers, been doing it all their lives, can definitely tell that, hey, this like a human can write 80% better than this, but most people can't tell, period, right? So that's where all the margin is in using AI and stuff like this, because it's a lot less expensive. But the thing is, like, if somebody's doing that, they're missing the process of learning. They're missing the process of doing this. And that's a big thing. So he said that over a decade ago, and maybe I think to the nose a decade ago, in fact. And it's an interesting thing for everything that's happening now, because essentially this guy, we'll call him Adam for now. He has a different name in Bangladesh, but he's optimizing to get into school rather than the learning, right? And
Okay.
he should be optimizing for the learning because he already makes 10 times more than the average salary is. Even like he's pushing past a doctor and lawyer.
Right.
He's been doing it month after month.
Yeah, I was saying 5,000 a month. I mean, that's higher than a lot of people make in first world countries.
That's what I mean. So,
Yeah.
and this is profit of so like it's not, he's making a lot more than that in straight up revenue and everything else, right? And there's
Sure.
lots of potential for more margin, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
it's just an interesting thing. So he's so distraught and frustrated to not get into school, but really, like, if he's optimizing for a lifestyle and to be happy, he should just be focusing on his business and what he's doing in that, really the contracting work that he's doing with me.
Yeah.
If he's look, because he's happy doing that, whereas now he's distraught and optimizing for what his parents are encouraging him to do in the state. Because he said to me just this week, he's like, I'll never get in. I'm like, that's a weird thing to say for a 21-year-old looking to go to a state school. I
Yeah.
guess I call it the state, right? Because it's
Right.
not like a U.S. state, a state school, for somebody to say that, like, because it just reminded me of when I was in school and when people were like they were nearly committing suicide because they couldn't get into the school they wanted to, and they thought
Yeah.
their life was over. When, like, at that time, a school didn't dictate anything. If we look fast forward to the future, because whether they win that school, they still have to network to get a job. Job isn't just handed to them when they graduate,
Yeah.
right? And even if it is, they still have to work hard at it because it's
Right.
competitive. Like, there's no job that's worth its salt that doesn't have somebody else wanting your job. So
Sure.
you even like in your work environment, right? So and then if you're saying, oh no, I have a business, well, you're in typically in you're not the only game in town, even if you have a patent or whatever, because that runs
Right.
out. So you've always got to be innovating.